Hey there, and welcome to Brada Tales. Tonight, we bring you a chilling collection of horror stories set against the soothing sound of rain. Before we dive into suspense, drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from and what time it is for you. If these stories send shivers down your spine, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Get comfortable, let the fear slowly take over, and tell us if you enjoy this kind of storytelling. Now sit back and relax, we're about to begin. Have you ever felt like something was watching you? It was a simple question, but it hung in the air like a fog. The sun had begun to set, casting long shadows over the cobblestone streets of our small town. I stood at the corner of West Elm and Maple, where I often met my friends after work. The cool breeze carried whispers of distant laughter, but there was an unsettling silence just beyond it. My name is Evan, and I've always considered myself an ordinary guy. A mild-mannered librarian, I found solace among the pages of books. Yet beneath that calm facade lay a storm of memories. A childhood marked by shadows that whispered my name in the dark. It wasn't until recently that those shadows began to stir again. As I leaned against the lamp post, an unusual sound sliced through the stillness, a faint rustle as if something was moving just out of sight. I shook my head, dismissing it as a trick of the wind. But a knot tightened in my stomach. The streetlight flickered, casting strange shapes that danced at the periphery of my vision. I glanced around, trying to shake off the feeling. The quaint houses that lined the street seemed harmless, even inviting. Yet as the shadows grew deeper, I felt an old, familiar fear creeping back. I could hear my heartbeat, each thud echoing like a warning in my ears. The air was thick with an unfamiliar scent, a mixture of damp earth and something metallic. I wrinkled my nose. My mind raced, recalling stories of the past. There had been whispers of a crime that shook this very town centuries ago, tales of a darkness that seeped into the lives of those who lived here. I took a deep breath, convincing myself it was nothing. Just my imagination. But doubt clung to me like a shadow. I walked towards the library, the familiar path suddenly feeling foreign and eerie. My footsteps echoed louder than usual, the sound bouncing off the walls of the buildings. Just as I reached for the door, a cold gust of wind swept past, sending a shiver down my spine. I froze, the hairs on my arms standing on end. There it was again, the rustling, now louder, as if something was right behind me. I turned quickly, my heart racing. Nothing. I forced a laugh, trying to shake off the unease. Just the wind, I told myself. But the laughter felt hollow, like an echo of a forgotten joke. I pushed the door open and stepped inside, seeking refuge among the bookshelves. The library was dimly lit, a comforting embrace against the growing darkness outside. Yet even here I felt it, a pressure, an invisible weight that pressed down on my chest. I walked through the aisles, the scent of old paper and ink mingling with the lingering fear that wrapped around me like a shroud. Then I heard it again. A whisper barely audible, calling from somewhere deep within the library. I stopped, my breath catching in my throat. It's just my mind playing tricks, I murmured. But there was a part of me that couldn't shake the feeling that I was not alone. With every step deeper into the library, the tension grew. The familiar turned unsettling, as if the walls themselves were closing in. The sound of my footsteps became a heartbeat, quick, frantic. I forced myself to move forward, drawn to the whisper like a moth to a flame. As I approached the back of the library, the air turned colder, thick with a sense of dread. The whisper transformed into a low hum, a melody I could not recognize but felt compelled to follow. I peered into the shadows, my heart racing. What awaited me there? What lay hidden in the depths of this place I thought I knew? The darkness shifted, and I took a hesitant step back. Was it just my imagination? Or was there something lurking just beyond my sight, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself? I couldn't tell anymore. The line between reality and nightmare blurred, and as the shadows danced around me, I felt the weight of the past pressing down, threatening to drag me into its depths. And I knew then I was being watched. The hum grew louder, wrapping around me like a shroud. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, each beat a frantic reminder that I was very much alive in this moment. The shadows cast by the flickering lights stretched and twisted, creating eerie shapes that seemed to move independently of the world around them. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. The familiar scent of books was now tainted with a metallic tang, sharper than before. It made my stomach churn. Just keep moving, I whispered to myself, a mantra meant to dispel the creeping dread. I stepped further into the back of the library, where the shelves loomed like sentinels guarding secrets long buried. The whispers became distinct, almost intelligible, yet still just beyond comprehension. I strained to listen, desperate to make sense of the chaos surrounding me. Help me. Find me, the words floated through the air, chilling me to the bone. Each step I took felt heavier, as if the very ground were pulling me down. I glanced over my shoulder, half expecting to see something lurking there, but found only darkness. The light from the entrance faded, leaving me in a cavern of shadows. Then a sharp sound broke the silence. A book fell from a shelf, thudding against the floor. I jumped, adrenaline coursing through my veins. My instincts screamed at me to flee, but an inexplicable force held me rooted in place. Curiosity clawed at me, demanding I investigate. I knelt to pick up the fallen book, its spine cracked and pages yellowed with age. The title read Echoes of the Past. It felt oddly fitting. As I opened it, a rush of cold air swept past me, making the hairs on my neck stand on end. I quickly flipped through the pages, searching for something, anything, that might explain the whispers. The words were a mix of history and folklore, tales of crimes and dark rituals that had taken place in our town long ago. I felt an unsettling connection to the stories, as if they were threads weaving through my own life. My fingers traced a passage about a figure that haunted the streets, searching for something lost. "What are you looking for?" I murmured, half hoping for an answer. The hum grew louder again, pulsing like a heartbeat. I was aware of a presence, something lurking just out of sight, watching, waiting. My skin prickled as I flipped through more pages, each one revealing more about the darkness that once consumed this place. I could feel the walls closing in around me, the atmosphere thickening as if it were alive. And then, just as I was about to turn to the next page, a shadow moved in my peripheral vision. I snapped my head up, heart racing. It was quick, darting between the shelves, a flicker of movement that sent a jolt of panic through me. My breath quickened, and I was suddenly aware of every sound, the rustling of the pages, the creaking of the floorboards, the distant echo of my own heartbeat. "Hello," I called out, my voice shaking. Silence answered me, heavy and oppressive. I felt like I was teetering on the edge of something vast and unknown. What if I was losing my mind? What if this was all in my head? The thought was terrifying. I took a tentative step forward, my eyes scanning the dimly lit aisles. The shadows seemed to breathe, and the air around me grew colder still. I reached for my phone, the glow of the screen providing a fragile barrier against the encroaching darkness. I flicked on the flashlight, illuminating the shelves ahead. And then I saw it, a figure standing at the far end of the aisle, cloaked in shadows. My breath caught in my throat. The shape was indistinct, but I could see the outline of a face, pale and haunting, its eyes glinting like shards of glass. It felt like staring into the abyss. I stumbled backward, the book slipping from my hands and hitting the floor with a heavy thud. The figure didn't move, just stood there, watching. My instincts screamed at me to run, but I felt paralyzed, caught in a web of fear and fascination. "Who are you?" I managed to choke out, my voice barely above a whisper. The figure tilted its head slightly, as if considering my question. Then with a fluid motion it stepped forward, and the lights flickered again, plunging me into deeper darkness. I felt the air grow thick, as if the very essence of dread was wrapping around me, squeezing tighter with every passing second. "Find me," the voice was a low murmur, echoing off the walls, reverberating in my mind. It felt both a command and a plea, and I could feel my resolve wavering. What was happening? Was I truly losing my grip on reality? Suddenly the light steadied, and the figure was gone. I blinked, heart racing, and found myself alone once more in the library. The silence was deafening, the only sound my ragged breaths. The sense of isolation was overwhelming, but I could not shake the feeling that I was not finished here. I had to know what it wanted, what it was searching for. The echoes of the past were calling to me, and deep down I felt an unexplainable connection. I picked up the book again, its pages now feeling heavier in my hands. I had to find out more. The shadows might have been closing in, but I refused to let fear dictate my actions. I would uncover the truth, even if it meant confronting the darkness that lingered in the corners of my mind. I turned to the next page, the words blurring as I lost myself in the history of the town, unaware that with each line I read, the shadows were gathering once more, ready to unveil their secrets. I flipped through the pages of echoes of the past, the musty scent of old paper mixing with the chill in the air. My hands trembled slightly, not just from fear, but from a sense of urgency. The words blurred together as I scanned the text, searching for anything that might explain the figure I had seen, or the whispers that beckoned me deeper into the darkness. As I turned a page, a photograph slipped out and fluttered to the floor. I bent down to retrieve it, my heart racing. It was an old, faded image of a group of townsfolk gathered in front of the library, their faces obscured by shadows. But one figure stood out, cloaked in a dark robe, a hood covering its features. The atmosphere of the photo was heavy, a palpable tension radiating from the subject's stony expressions. I felt a chill run down my spine. There was something unsettling about the figure, something that resonated with my earlier encounter. Was this the entity I had seen? a specter of the past trapped in the echo of a forgotten crime. My thoughts raced, piecing together fragments of history that had long been buried. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed through the library, reverberating off the walls and causing me to jump. The sound came from the front entrance, and instinct kicked in. I closed the book, clutching it tightly as I moved cautiously toward the source of the noise. My mind raced with possibilities. Was it just a door slamming in the wind, or was there something more sinister at play? The dim light from my phone illuminated the path ahead, casting long shadows that danced on the walls like specters. Each step felt like a descent into a deeper abyss, a plunge into a world where reality and nightmare intertwined. The atmosphere thickened, the air heavy with anticipation. As I reached the main room of the library, I paused. The entrance was wide open, the wind whipping through the doorway, sending papers fluttering into the air like frightened birds. I stepped inside, my pulse quickening. The shadows in the corners seemed to shift and swirl, drawing closer as I moved. "Hello," I called out, my voice shaky and uncertain. There was no response, only the sound of the wind howling through the open door. I took a few cautious steps, scanning the room for any sign of life. The library felt empty, almost abandoned, yet I could not shake the feeling that I was being watched. I walked to the entrance, peering into the night. The streetlights flickered, casting a ghostly glow over the pavement. Just beyond the light, the darkness loomed, thick and impenetrable. The hair on the back of my neck stood on end. It was as if something was waiting just beyond the reach of the light. Then out of the corner of my eye, I caught a glimpse of movement, a shadow darting past one of the windows. My heart raced as I turned to follow it, but there was nothing there. Just an empty street, the night silent except for the rustling leaves. "Get a grip, Evan," I muttered to myself. "It's just your imagination," but even as I spoke, the doubt gnawed at me, a persistent whisper echoing in my mind. I couldn't shake the feeling that the figure from the library was still close by, lurking just out of sight. Determined to uncover the truth, I returned to the back of the library, seeking solace among the shelves. The book felt heavier in my hands, a tangible reminder of the darkness I was delving into. I needed to find answers. The whispers demanded it. I settled back into the dim light, flipping through the pages with renewed fervor. Each sentence unveiled stories of betrayal, loss, and the unspeakable horrors that once gripped the town. My fingers brushed over a passage that detailed a ritual gone wrong, a gathering of townsfolk who had sought to harness the darkness for their own gain. They had summoned something that had been locked away in the depths of the earth. "Find me," I murmured again, recalling the voice that had urged me earlier. It felt like a riddle, a challenge laid before me. Was I meant to uncover the truth about this dark figure? Or was I merely a pawn in a game played by forces beyond my understanding? As I read deeper, the temperature in the room dropped further. I wrapped my arms around myself, the chill biting through my clothes. I could hear the whispers again, soft yet insistent, weaving through the words on the page. I closed my eyes for a moment, trying to focus on the meaning behind them. "Levin." The voice was clearer now, echoing in my mind as if it were coming from the depths of the library itself. My eyes shot open and I glanced around, heart pounding. I was no longer alone. The shadows seemed to pulse with life, and I could feel the presence of something watching me from the dark corners. "Who are you?" I called out, my voice trembling. "What do you want?" The air grew colder still, wrapping around me like a vice. And then the figure emerged from the darkness, stepping into the faint light. Its features were still obscured, but I could see its eyes, pale, almost luminescent, filled with a desperate longing. "Find me," it repeated, its voice low and haunting. "You are the key." The weight of its words crashed over me like a wave. I felt a pull, an undeniable connection to this entity, as if it had been waiting for me all along. I took a step back, fear wrestling with a strange compulsion to move forward. "What do you mean?" I stammered, grappling with the overwhelming sense of dread. "What do you want from me?" But the figure only pointed towards the depths of the library, urging me to follow. It was an invitation and a warning, a thread woven into the fabric of my reality. I hesitated, the shadows swirling around me, but I knew I had to uncover the truth, whatever it may cost. With one last glance at the haunted figure, I steeled myself and stepped deeper into the library, the weight of history pressing down on me. The darkness ahead felt alive, and as I ventured further into its depths, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was about to unearth secrets that had long been buried, secrets that could change everything. The air in the library thickened with each step I took, as if the shadows themselves were wrapping around me. I felt a strange mix of fear and exhilaration. The weight of the unknown pulled me deeper into its embrace. The figure loomed ahead, a phantom flickering between the rows of bookshelves, its presence both chilling and strangely familiar. "Find me," it urged again, the echo of its voice lingering in the air like smoke. I could feel the pull, an invisible thread weaving through my thoughts, urging me to uncover the mystery buried in the depths of this ancient building. As I advanced further into the library's labyrinthine depths, I noticed that the light from my phone flickered erratically, casting eerie shadows that danced along the walls. The familiar stacks of books transformed into a maze, each corner seemingly concealing untold horrors. I felt as if I were wandering through a living entity, the library itself a creature with a heartbeat, breathing in the silence. "Is this really happening?" I whispered, my voice trembling. The weight of the book in my hands felt heavier, as if it were filled with the essence of the stories within, stories that were more than mere words. They were echoes of a time long past, imprinted with fear and loss. I caught a glimpse of the figure again, its form becoming clearer. It seemed to glide through the aisles, moving with an unnatural grace. I followed, compelled by an urge I could neither understand nor resist. The whispers intensified, swirling around me like a tempest, blurring the line between reality and the realm of the supernatural. "Where are you leading me?" I called out, my voice echoing against the shelves. The figure paused, turning slightly as if acknowledging my question. Its eyes glowed with an unsettling light, urging me forward. I felt a strange kinship with this entity, a shared sense of purpose that transcended fear. As I turned a corner, I stumbled upon a secluded alcove, a forgotten corner of the library. Dust motes danced in the faint light, and an ancient, ornate table sat at the center, covered with yellowed papers and odd trinkets. It felt like a shrine, a place where the past still lingered, waiting to be rediscovered. I approached cautiously, the hairs on my neck standing on end. Among the scattered papers, I spotted an old journal, its leather cover cracked and worn. I reached for it, my fingers trembling as I opened the cover. The handwriting inside was hurried and chaotic, filled with frenzied scrawls that detailed strange occurrences and inexplicable events. "They're coming for me," one entry read, the ink smudged as if the writer had been frantic. "The shadows grow restless, and the past will not let me go. I can hear their whispers." My heart raced. Could this have been the voice of someone who had faced the same terror? I flipped through the pages, each one revealing more about the figure I had encountered, the townsfolk who had summoned it, the rituals that had gone wrong, and the darkness that had seeped into their lives. "Find me," the voice whispered again, echoing in my mind, weaving through the lines of the journal. I was on the brink of understanding something profound, a truth that could unravel everything I thought I knew about this town and myself. Suddenly, the library trembled, a deep rumble that resonated through the air. I glanced up, heart pounding as the shadows thickened, swirling like a dark vortex around me. The figure reappeared, closer now, its presence more intense. I could feel the energy radiating from it, a desperate play masked in an air of tragedy. "Help me," it whispered, extending a hand towards me. The anguish in its voice was palpable, a reminder that it was not just a spirit of the past, but a soul trapped in a cycle of despair. I felt an overwhelming urge to reach out, to bridge the gap between our worlds. But fear held me back, anchoring me to the spot. "What do you need?" I asked, my voice shaking. "How can I help you?" The figure gestured toward the journal, its eyes plating. "You must understand. The past cannot be ignored. To break the cycle, you must confront the darkness." I felt a shiver run down my spine. The weight of its words settled over me like a heavy cloak. I understood now that my journey was not merely about uncovering secrets. It was about confronting the darkness that had seeped into the fabric of this town. I picked up the journal again, flipping through the pages with renewed determination. "What happened to you?" I pressed, desperate for answers. The figure remained silent, its form wavering like a candle's flame, caught between realms. Just then, a loud crash echoed through the library, shaking the shelves and sending dust flying into the air. I jumped, adrenaline coursing through my veins as I turned toward the noise. Something was trying to break through, a force desperate to emerge from the depths of the darkness. "Evan," the figure's voice pierced the chaos. "You must act. Time is running out." I could feel the panic rising within me, but I couldn't let fear control my actions. I needed to face whatever lay ahead. With a surge of resolve, I turned back to the journal, searching for clues that would guide me in confronting the malevolence threatening to engulf me. The pages revealed hints of rituals, words of power, invocations meant to summon or banish. I scanned them quickly, my heart racing. The shadows thickened, coiling around me like serpents, and the air grew colder, more oppressive. I could sense a malevolent presence, hungry and waiting for the right moment to strike. "Help me," the figure urged again, its voice a haunting melody of desperation and hope. I glanced up, meeting its luminous gaze. In that moment, I understood that we were bound together in this fight against the darkness. "I will help you," I promised, my voice steadying. "But I need to know what to do." "Speak the words," it urged, gesturing toward the journal. "Invoke the past, and the shadows will recede." I took a deep breath, gathering my courage. The weight of history pressed down on me, the burden of the souls trapped within the library echoing through time. I could feel their pain, their longing for release. With trembling hands, I opened the journal to the designated passage, my heart pounding in anticipation. I will break this cycle, I declared, my voice rising above the chaos. I will confront the darkness. As I began to recite the words inscribed on the page, the shadows recoiled, a cacophony of whispers erupting around me. The figure moved closer, its energy merging with mine, creating a shield against the encroaching malevolence. The library trembled as the air crackled with power. I could feel the weight of the past bearing down on me, the spirits of those who had come before urging me forward. The darkness swirled, a tempest of fear and rage, but I stood my ground. I will not let you take me, I shouted, my voice echoing like thunder. The words poured from my lips, ancient incantations weaving through the air, resonating with the very essence of the library. The shadows writhed, and for a moment I could see them, distorted faces twisted in anguish, grasping for something lost. As I reached the final words of the invocation, a blinding light erupted from the pages, flooding the room and banishing the darkness. The figure beside me shimmered, its features becoming clearer, revealing a face etched with sorrow but also hope. "Thank you," it whispered, its voice soft yet powerful. "You have set me free." With those words, the shadows began to dissipate, swirling away like smoke in the wind. The oppressive weight lifted, and the air felt lighter, as if the library itself was exhaling after being held captive for far too long. But as the light faded, I felt a deep emptiness settle in my chest. The figure smiled at me, its form starting to dissolve into the light. "Remember, Evan," it said, its voice echoing in my mind. "The past is a part of you. Do not forget." And then it was gone, leaving me alone in the library, the weight of history now a comforting presence rather than a burden. I stood in the silence, the only sound the soft rustle of the pages around me. I took a moment to gather myself, feeling the lingering echoes of what had just transpired. The library felt different now, liberated, almost alive with possibilities. I had faced the darkness and emerged stronger. But deep down, a lingering question remained. Had I truly broken the cycle, or had I merely pushed it back into the shadows, waiting for another chance to emerge? The thought gnawed at me, a reminder that the past never truly disappears. As I stepped back toward the entrance, I felt a newfound determination. I would not allow the darkness to take root again. I would uncover the truth about this town, its history, and my own connection to it. The journey was far from over, it was just beginning. The silence of the library enveloped me like a shroud, yet it felt lighter now, as if a great weight had been lifted from its dusty shelves. The remnants of the shadowy figure still echoed in my mind, its last words resonating with a haunting urgency. I took a deep breath, steadying myself as I stepped into the main hall, the beams of moonlight spilling through the tall windows and illuminating the path ahead. Outside, the night was still and unnaturally quiet, the world holding its breath as if waiting for something monumental to unfold. I glanced back at the library's grand entrance, feeling an odd mix of closure and trepidation. Had I truly banished the darkness, or merely postponed its return? As I made my way down the steps, a sense of unease settled in my stomach. The streets felt foreign, shadows lurking in every corner, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I recalled the whispers and the flickering lights, the way the air had thrummed with energy. It was as if the town itself had been transformed, revitalized by the confrontation I had just faced. I headed toward the town square, the cobblestones glistening under the streetlights. The faint hum of distant voices echoed through the night, mingling with the rustle of leaves. But the closer I got to the square, the more the atmosphere changed. An unsettling chill crept over me, a palpable tension that hinted at something lurking beneath the surface. In the square, I spotted a group of people gathered, their faces illuminated by the glow of lanterns. They spoke in hushed tones, casting furtive glances toward the center of the square where an old fountain stood, its water stagnant and murky. Intrigued, I approached cautiously, my heart pounding in sync with the growing unease. As I drew nearer, I overheard snippets of conversation. "It's happening again," one voice trembled. "I saw her last night right by the library," another voice whispered. "We can't let it spread." "We must do something." A shiver ran down my spine. It seemed that the darkness I had faced was not an isolated incident. The town was grappling with something far more insidious, something rooted in its history. I felt the weight of my responsibility pressing down on me. I had faced the shadows in the library, but what awaited me now in the open air? "Excuse me," I said, stepping into the circle of people. Their heads turned, eyes widening with a mixture of fear and curiosity. "What's going on? What are you talking about?" A woman stepped forward, her expression one of deep concern. "You don't know, do you? There have been sightings, things moving in the dark. People have gone missing. It's as if the past is resurfacing, and we don't know how to stop it." The urgency in her voice ignited a spark of determination within me. "I just came from the library. I faced something there, something dark that has been haunting this town. We need to work together." Gasps of surprise rippled through the group. "You faced it?" Alone, another man asked, skepticism etched on his face. I had help, I admitted, the memory of the spectral figure fresh in my mind. "But I believe it's connected to a ritual, something that was done long ago. We can't let it continue." The woman nodded, her eyes filled with hope. "Then we must gather everyone. We need to confront this together. If the past is coming back, we have to stop it before it consumes us." A sense of purpose washed over me, and I felt a newfound resolve. I gathered a small group, those who had witnessed the strange occurrences, and we formed a plan. As we spoke, I shared the details from the journal, the rituals that had gone wrong, and the entity I had encountered. "Then we need to find the original site of the ritual," the woman suggested, her voice steady. "It may hold the key to understanding what's happening now." The others nodded, and I felt the weight of our collective fear transform into determination. We would not be victims of our history. We would take a stand against the darkness. As we moved through the winding streets, I could feel the atmosphere shift, a palpable tension crackling in the air. Shadows flickered at the edges of my vision, and I found myself glancing over my shoulder, half expecting to see the figure that had haunted me in the library. But this time it was different. We were united, a force against the encroaching darkness. We made our way to the outskirts of town, where the old chapel stood, crumbling and weathered, yet exuding a sense of history that resonated with the stories of those who had come before. It was said to be the site of the original ritual, the place where the townsfolk had sought to harness the power of the shadows. As we approached, the air grew heavy, and an unnatural stillness enveloped the chapel. I could feel the energy shift, a strange pulse that seemed to emanate from the very ground beneath our feet. The group fell silent, fear mingling with anticipation. "Are we sure about this?" one man whispered, glancing nervously at the crumbling structure. "What if it's worse than we think?" I stepped forward, determination surging within me. "We need to know the truth. We can't let fear dictate our actions. Whatever is happening, we must face it together." With that, we pushed open the heavy wooden door, the creaking sound echoing through the darkness. Inside, the chapel was cloaked in shadows, the flickering light of our lanterns casting eerie patterns on the walls. The air felt thick, charged with energy, and I could sense that we were not alone. As we stepped further inside, I caught sight of remnants of the past, old candles, tattered remnants of fabric, and strange markings etched into the stone floor. The atmosphere was electric, alive with the weight of history and the promise of confrontation. Suddenly, a chill swept through the room, and I felt the presence of something watching us, lurking just beyond the edges of the light. I could hear whispers, faint yet insistent, echoing through the stone walls. "Stay close," I urged the group, my heart racing. "We must find the source of the energy in this place." As we moved deeper into the chapel, the whispers grew louder, swirling around us like a storm. The air crackled with tension, and I felt a sense of urgency building within me. The shadows were shifting, coiling like serpents around our feet, and I knew we were nearing the heart of the darkness. Then at the altar I spotted it, a faded tapestry depicting the original ritual, the townsfolk gathered around a dark figure cloaked in shadows. My heart raced as I stepped closer, recognizing the same figure I had encountered in the library. "What is this?" one of the others asked, stepping up beside me. "What is that?" "It's the same figure," I confirmed, awe and dread mixing within me. "It's part of our history, and we need to understand its significance." As I studied the tapestry, the whispers intensified, merging into a haunting chant that reverberated through the chapel. I closed my eyes, feeling the energy surge around us, urging me to delve deeper into the past. Images flashed in my mind, visions of the townsfolk, their faces twisted in fear and desperation as they performed the ritual. "Stop," a voice called out, slicing through the cacophony. It was the woman from earlier, her eyes wide with realization. "We have to break the cycle. We can't allow the shadows to reclaim their power." Her words echoed in my mind, and I knew what we had to do. We had to confront the darkness, to face the entity that had haunted this town for generations. "Everyone gather around," I shouted, feeling the weight of history pressing down on us. "We need to stand united. We must confront the past to reclaim our future." As the group formed a circle around the altar, I took a deep breath, drawing upon the strength of those who had come before me. The shadows danced at the edges of our light, but together we would face them head-on. "Repeat after me," I urged, feeling the energy coalesce in the air around us. "We are not afraid. We will break this cycle." With that, we began to chant, our voices rising in a powerful chorus that resonated through the chapel. The shadows writhed and surged, a swirling tempest of darkness, but we held our ground, determination fueling our resolve. The atmosphere crackled with energy, and I could feel the weight of the past lifting as we faced the entity that had haunted our town for too long. We would not be victims of our history. We would reclaim our future together. It started with a sound I couldn't ignore. A faint beeping at first, just enough to make me check my phone. But there was no notification, no reason for the beep. I shrugged it off. I had gotten used to these little oddities. Life sometimes felt like a series of coincidences. My name is Adam. I live alone in an apartment I've rented for far too long. I don't make friends easily. My past, well, it's not something I like to talk about. But that's not what matters right now. What matters is this: I've been receiving a signal on my phone, a message without a source, a sound that haunts me. At first, I thought I was just hearing things. The kind of thing people dismiss when they're tired or stressed or just too caught up in their own heads. But after the third time, I started paying attention. Every night around midnight, it would happen. A single beep like a clock ticking, but no message. It was unsettling. The apartment was quiet that night, almost too quiet. I had been sitting in the living room, just staring at the walls, when the beep echoed through the room again. This time I couldn't dismiss it as nothing. I reached for my phone, but it wasn't the usual notification sound. It was a pattern, a rhythm, a mechanical pulse. I stared at the screen, waiting for something to appear, but the phone was completely still. No new text, no missed calls, just that pulse. I glanced around, trying to shake off the feeling. I hadn't been alone for long, 2 months, maybe 3. Long enough for the place to feel like home, but still, there were moments when I couldn't quite shake the unease. The walls seemed to close in on me at night. The flickering of the overhead lights didn't help. Neither did the drafts that whispered across the room, although I always told myself it was just the old building settling. But that beat, it wouldn't stop. I tried turning the phone off and on again. Nothing changed. The sound was still there, echoing in my mind. And then it happened. I swear I heard it, footsteps. Soft and deliberate, pacing just outside my door. The sound was too distinct to ignore. I stood frozen, my hand still gripping the phone. My heart raced and my breath felt tight in my chest. No one was supposed to be here. Not at this hour. I wasn't imagining things. The footsteps were real. They grew louder, closer. I knew I had to move, but my legs wouldn't cooperate. I couldn't tear my eyes away from the door. Then another sound. The doorbell. But who would be at my door? The pressure in my chest grew heavier, like a weight was slowly pressing down on me. I approached the door, but my hand hesitated on the handle. I wasn't expecting anyone. The footsteps stopped. For a moment there was silence. The kind of silence that makes you question whether your mind is playing tricks on you. I opened the door slowly, cautiously, trying to shake off the deep unease crawling up my spine. No one. Just the cold, empty hallway. I stepped out, looking left and right. The hallway was empty, as it should have been. The apartment building wasn't exactly a party spot at night. I checked the floor, the ceiling. No signs of anyone. But something still felt wrong. The air had a strange heaviness to it, like it was charged with something I couldn't quite place. The silence was so thick, it pressed against my eardrums. And then, just when I thought it was safe to go back inside, there was a soft rustling. A whisper. No, not a whisper. A voice. I didn't catch the words, but I felt it cold and clear in my mind. The voice wasn't just from the hallway. It was inside me, somewhere deep, like it was trying to speak directly into my soul. I stumbled back into my apartment, locking the door behind me. The signal was still there, but now it felt like more than just an annoying glitch. It felt like a warning, and I couldn't ignore it anymore. The silence in my apartment was suffocating, broken only by the occasional beep from my phone. The signal had returned, louder this time. It wasn't just a quiet ping anymore. It was persistent, like a warning, like something that had to be acknowledged. I tried to calm myself down. My hands were shaking, and I could barely keep my grip on the phone. I sat down on the couch, the dim light from the hallway casting long shadows across the room. The air felt thick, charged with something unnatural, like a storm was building somewhere just out of reach. I knew I should call someone. Maybe a friend. Maybe the landlord. But I didn't want to sound crazy. I didn't want to admit that something was wrong, that the world I thought I understood was slipping away. I tried to convince myself that it was just a glitch, some weird interference with the phone. But even as I thought it, I knew that wasn't true. The footsteps outside my door had been real. I wasn't imagining them. I wasn't imagining the voice either. And the signal, it didn't make sense. It was a pattern, a repetitive sound, but it had no source. It wasn't like a regular notification from an app or a message from someone. It was something else. Something I couldn't explain. I stood up, pacing the apartment. My footsteps were loud, echoing against the bare walls. I went to the kitchen and grabbed a glass of water, hoping it would help steady my nerves. But as I drank, the beeping persisted, growing louder, more insistent. The sound was coming from everywhere, inside my head, outside the door, from the walls themselves. I couldn't escape it. The pulse, the rhythm. I could feel it in my chest now, like my heart had started beating in time with it. I tried to turn the phone off again, but it wouldn't respond. The screen stayed black, the signal still pulsing through the air. I slammed the phone onto the kitchen counter, frustrated, but that only made things worse. The sound seemed to intensify, filling the room with an unbearable pressure. Then the phone vibrated. I grabbed it again, my hands slick with sweat. A message appeared on the screen. But there was no name, no number, just a string of numbers and letters, something like this: XQ5W9 plus TXR. I stared at it, my heart racing. The message was meaningless, but it felt important. Like it was a code, something I was supposed to decode. But how? What did it mean? I sat down at the kitchen table, my eyes glued to the screen. The beeping had stopped, replaced by a deep, low hum that seemed to reverberate in my bones. The phone was hot to the touch, almost burning. It felt wrong, but I couldn't look away. I had to figure this out. There was a knocking sound, soft at first, then louder, almost like someone was rapping on the door with their knuckles. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. The knocking didn't stop. It became rhythmic, like the pattern on my phone, as if it was in sync with the sound that had been echoing through my head. I stood up again, my legs unsteady. The knocking had stopped, but something was different. I could feel it in the air. The space around me felt wrong, like the walls were closing in. I rushed to the door, my hand trembling on the doorknob. I had to know. I had to see who or what was on the other side. I opened the door slowly, heart pounding in my chest. There was no one, just the empty hallway again. But this time I could feel the cold air seeping into the apartment, like something was waiting just outside. I stepped into the hallway, looking both ways. The light above flickered again, casting shadows that seemed to move of their own accord. The walls felt closer, and the floor beneath my feet seemed to shift, like it wasn't quite solid. I shook my head, trying to clear the fog that was creeping into my mind. Then there it was again. A voice. It was faint, almost imperceptible, but it was there. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was unmistakable. It was the same voice I had heard earlier in my apartment. The one that hadn't come from anywhere. I backed away, my breath coming in shallow gasps. The door slammed shut behind me, trapping me in the hallway. I turned, my eyes scanning the darkened space. The walls were closer now, the shadows stretching and warping as if they were alive. I tried to breathe, tried to steady myself, but the phone in my pocket buzzed again. The signal was back, stronger than ever. The hum was louder now, almost deafening. It filled my head, making it hard to think. I pulled the phone out, my hands slick with sweat, and I saw another message on the screen. This one was different. It wasn't just a string of random characters. It was a location. 208 Bixby Street. 10:42 p.m. My heart skipped a beat. The address was familiar. It was the old factory on the edge of town. The one that had been abandoned for years. I didn't know why, but I had to go there. The factory loomed in my mind like a shadow. 208 Bixby Street. I hadn't thought about the place in years. It had been abandoned for as long as I could remember, a forgotten relic of the past, with cracked windows and rusted doors. No one went there anymore. But now it felt like it was calling me. The message on my phone had stirred something deep inside me, a sense of urgency I couldn't explain. The hum of the signal was still there, a constant thrum in the background, like a heartbeat that had taken over my own. The time was 10:42 p.m., but it felt like the clock on my phone was mocking me, dragging every second into an eternity. My mind raced, but there was something about the factory that gnawed at me. The address, the time, it was all too deliberate, too planned. It felt like a trap, but I couldn't walk away from it. Not now. Not after everything that had happened. I stood in the middle of my apartment, staring at the door, debating whether I should leave. The hum from my phone was louder now, vibrating in my pocket like an extension of my own pulse. I hadn't even realized it, but I had already made my decision. My hand shook as I grabbed my jacket and slipped on my shoes, the cold air outside pressing against the back of my neck like an unwelcome presence. As I stepped outside, the night felt different. The usual sounds of the city were muted, as if the world itself was holding its breath. The only thing I could hear was the distant hum of the phone in my pocket, like a persistent whisper I couldn't ignore. The streets were empty, the lights casting long shadows that seemed to move with a life of their own. I wrapped my jacket tightly around myself and started walking, each step feeling heavier than the last. The factory wasn't far. It sat on the outskirts of town, where the streets were quieter and the buildings stood in various states of decay. The path I took was familiar, but the further I walked, the more unsettled I became. The air felt colder, like I was moving through an empty space that didn't belong to the world I knew. I could almost hear the walls closing in behind me, pressing me forward, urging me toward the destination I couldn't avoid. As I approached the factory, a sense of dread settled over me, a feeling that only intensified when I saw the building in the distance. It looked the same as it always had, dark, broken, abandoned, but tonight it felt different. It felt alive. The shadows stretched unnaturally across the ground, and the wind whispered through the broken windows, carrying with it the faintest echoes of something I couldn't place. I stopped at the entrance, staring at the rusted gates. The factory's towering silhouette seemed to loom over me, blocking out the moonlight. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. It was as if the factory was waiting for me. I reached for my phone, the buzzing growing louder, and I checked the screen. The signal was stronger than ever. It felt like it was coming from inside the factory, pulling me in, beckoning me forward. With a deep breath, I pushed open the gate. The sound of it creaking seemed to pierce the silence, echoing through the empty streets. I stepped inside, my footsteps soft on the gravel as I made my way toward the main building. The door was slightly ajar, as if someone or something was expecting me. The moment I stepped inside, the temperature dropped. It was colder than it should have been, the air thick with the scent of decay and dust. My breath came out in visible clouds, and I pulled my jacket tighter around me. I stood still for a moment, letting my eyes adjust to the dim light that filtered in through the broken windows. The factory floor was empty, save for piles of old machinery and debris. But there was something about the place that felt wrong, as if it had been waiting for me for a long time. I glanced down at my phone. The screen was glowing brighter than before, and the signal was still there, louder now, like it was vibrating in my bones. I took another step, my feet crunching against the broken glass beneath me. I didn't know what I was looking for, but I couldn't stop moving forward. My mind was clouded, my thoughts swirling with confusion and fear. Then I saw it. At the far end of the factory floor, in the shadows near an old conveyor belt, a figure stood. At first I thought it was just a trick of the light, a shadow cast by the crumbling walls. But as I stepped closer, I saw it more clearly. The figure was tall, its form indistinct, blending into the darkness. It stood perfectly still, watching me with an unblinking stare. My heart skipped a beat. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up, and I could feel the blood drain from my face. I wanted to turn and run, but my legs felt like they were rooted to the ground. My breath was shallow, my chest tight with fear. The figure didn't move. It just stood there waiting, as if it knew exactly what I was thinking. I took a cautious step forward, my voice catching in my throat as I spoke. "Who are you?" No answer. Just the sound of my voice echoing through the empty factory. I took another step, and that's when I saw it. The figure wasn't alone. Behind it in the shadows were more shapes, more figures standing motionless, their eyes fixed on me. The signal on my phone buzzed louder, the hum vibrating in my skull. I felt like I was drowning in it, the sound closing in on me, pressing down on my chest. My vision blurred, and for a moment I couldn't tell where the shadows ended and the figures began. The world around me seemed to warp and shift, like I was standing on the edge of something I couldn't quite grasp. I stumbled back, but my feet tangled in the debris. I fell hard onto the floor, my hands scraping against the rough concrete. The figures were closer now, moving toward me in a slow, deliberate pace. And then I heard it, whispers. Faint at first, but growing louder, overlapping with the buzzing in my ears. Words I couldn't understand. I pushed myself up, panic flooding my chest, and turned to run. But something stopped me. The door, the one I had entered through, was gone. The hallway had closed up. The factory had swallowed it whole. There was no way out. I was trapped. Panic flooded through me like a tidal wave. My heart hammered in my chest, and my breath came in short, ragged gasps. I could feel the sweat pooling at the back of my neck, a chill running down my spine as the figures continued to move closer. Their footsteps, soft but deliberate, echoed in the vast, empty factory. The buzzing from my phone was deafening now, filling my skull with a vibration that felt like it was drilling into my very bones. I scrambled to my feet, my legs shaking beneath me. I couldn't think. My body was on autopilot, driven by the overwhelming need to escape. The figures, there were too many of them, were closing in on me. Their movements were slow, methodical, as if they had all the time in the world to catch me. The whispers, barely audible at first, were now almost tangible, wrapping around me like tendrils. They weren't just in my ears, they were inside my head. Get out, get out, get out. The words were distorted, muffled, but they were unmistakable. I could hear them as clearly as if someone had been standing right beside me. My pulse raced and I stumbled backward, searching for an exit, anything. The factory felt like a maze now, the walls twisting and shifting, closing in on me. I couldn't find the door. I couldn't find a way out. I turned around, frantically looking for a path, a window, anything that would let me escape this nightmare. But the space seemed to warp around me, the shadows growing longer, swallowing the faint light that managed to seep through the cracks. The floor beneath me seemed to shift, rising and falling like the surface of a dark, endless sea. I tried to move, but my body refused to obey. My feet felt glued to the ground. The more I struggled, the more the figures seemed to multiply. There was no escape. They were everywhere, closing in on me from all directions. Their movements were silent, but the air was thick with their presence, as if I could feel them pressing against me. It's too late, the voice whispered, a cold, hollow sound that seemed to come from within the walls themselves. You shouldn't have come here. The words cut through the air like a knife. I felt a chill run down my spine, my knees threatening to buckle beneath me. I couldn't breathe. The air had become thick, suffocating, and every breath I took felt like I was inhaling ice. I wanted to scream, but the sound stuck in my throat. My head spun, and the world around me blurred. The figures were closer now, too close. Their faces were indistinct, lost in the shadows, but their eyes, they glowed. A pale, eerie light that seemed to pierce through the darkness, locking onto me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. I felt the weight of their gaze on me, pressing down with a force that made it hard to breathe. I backed into a corner, my back hitting the cold concrete wall. My phone was still buzzing, still vibrating in my pocket like a living thing. I fumbled with it, desperate to silence it, to make it stop. But when I pulled it out, the screen was filled with static. The numbers and letters, the messages, it was all a blur, like the signal was distorting reality itself. The hum from the phone was almost unbearable now, the sound vibrating through my skull, shaking me to my core. It felt like the signal wasn't just coming from the phone anymore. It felt like it was coming from the very air around me. The entire factory was alive with it, the walls, the floor, even the shadows. They were all vibrating in sync, like they were all part of the same twisted frequency. I couldn't focus. The figures were so close now, too close. Their hands reached out, their fingers long and skeletal, moving with unnatural speed. They didn't make a sound when they moved, but I could feel them closing in on me, their presence suffocating me. I reached out, desperate to find something to defend myself with, but there was nothing. The factory was empty, save for the machinery and debris that littered the floor. The whispers became louder, more insistent. You don't belong here. They weren't just words anymore. They were commands, like the figures were speaking directly into my mind. I could feel the pressure building inside my head, my thoughts becoming tangled, confused. I couldn't think. I couldn't breathe. Alive. No, I didn't know what to do. The door was gone. The hallway was a memory. I was trapped in this place, this nightmare, with no way out. The figures were right in front of me now, their glowing eyes inches from mine. Their skin was like paper, thin and fragile, stretched tight over their bones. I could see the darkness beneath it, like they were hollow inside. My breath caught in my throat. I wanted to scream, but the sound never came. I opened my mouth, but all I could hear was the hum, the static, the beeping from my phone, growing louder and louder until everything stopped. The hum, the whispers, the figures. It was all gone just like that. The factory was silent again, the only sound my shallow breaths and the pounding of my heart in my ears. I blinked, trying to make sense of what had just happened. The figures, had they disappeared? Was I hallucinating? Was it the signal messing with my mind? I didn't know what to believe anymore. But then I looked around, and there it was, an exit. A door I hadn't seen before, standing open at the far end of the factory. The air felt clearer now, less oppressive. Something about the door felt different. The buzzing from my phone had stopped, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still wrong. I couldn't explain it, but I knew I couldn't stay here. Not after what I'd seen. Not after what I'd heard. I ran toward the door. The door stood open, its wooden frame cracked and splintered, as if it had been waiting for me. My breath came in ragged gasps, my pulse still racing from the terror I had just experienced. But there was no turning back now. The factory, the figures, the whispers, they were all in the past now, but I knew they weren't gone for good. Not completely. I could still feel the echo of their presence lingering in the air, a weight pressing down on me from all directions. I stumbled toward the door, my legs shaky from the adrenaline that still surged through my veins. Each step felt like it was taking me deeper into a nightmare, but at the same time, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was pulling me forward, guiding me toward the exit. It was almost as if the door itself was calling to me, urging me to leave the darkness behind. I stepped through, the cold night air hitting my skin like a shock. I stood outside the factory now, my body trembling from the sudden shift in temperature. The night was still and silent, and for a brief moment, it almost felt like nothing had happened. Like the factory had just been a bad dream, a figment of my imagination. But I knew better. The hum, the signal, I could still feel it faintly, like an aftershock reverberating in the back of my mind. The static, the buzz, the pull. It was still there, just beneath the surface, like a persistent shadow that refused to disappear. I looked back at the factory, the building looming over me like some forgotten monument to something dark and ancient. The windows were shattered, the walls cracked and peeling, but there was something else in the air. Something that hadn't been there before. It was subtle, but it was there. A shift, a change. I couldn't explain it, but I knew that whatever had happened inside that factory hadn't just stayed inside. It had followed me. It was with me now. I turned away, forcing myself to keep moving, to put as much distance between myself and that place as possible. My phone was still in my hand, but it felt wrong to look at it. The screen was black now, no longer showing the messages or the strange symbols that had haunted me earlier. I wanted to believe it was over. That it was just some bizarre glitch, some twisted coincidence that had somehow taken hold of me. But the feeling in my gut told me otherwise. I wasn't free. Not yet. I kept walking, the streets empty and silent around me. The city felt different, too. It was familiar, but it was like a stranger's face, one I could almost recognize but couldn't quite place. The streetlights flickered above me, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch out and grab at my heels. I could feel them, the figures, watching from the darkness. They weren't gone. They were still here, hiding in the corners of my vision, waiting for me to look away. I glanced down at my phone again, almost instinctively. The screen remained black, but then, just as I was about to put it away, the hum came back. Faint but unmistakable. A low, vibrating pulse that seemed to come from deep within the phone. I froze. The screen flickered once, twice, and then a new message appeared. It's not over. You'll never escape. The words sent a shock through me, freezing me in place. My stomach turned and the world seemed to tilt sideways. I gripped the phone tighter, my hands slick with sweat. I looked around, searching the street for anything that could help me make sense of this, but the night was empty. Quiet. I was alone, but I didn't feel alone. The hum was louder now, vibrating through my body, and I could hear it, just faintly, coming from all around me. It was as if the whole city was alive with it, like the very air itself had been infected by whatever had started in that factory. I wanted to scream, to run, but the words on the phone paralyzed me. You can't escape. You never could. The voice. It wasn't just the words. It was the tone. Cold, empty. It was as if someone was trying to break through, to get inside my mind. I didn't know if it was the signal, the factory, or something else entirely. But I knew one thing for sure. It was real. It was all real. I pressed the phone to my ear, desperate to hear something, anything that could explain what was happening. But all I heard was static. The kind of static that made your teeth ache. The kind that felt like it was tearing at the fabric of reality itself. Suddenly a sound broke through the static. A voice, faint and distorted, but unmistakable. You can't outrun it. I turned around, my heart in my throat. The streets behind me were empty, but the hum was louder. Closer. It was everywhere now, all around me. I looked down at the phone again, and the screen was flashing. Numbers and letters. A location. What time? It didn't make sense. I couldn't follow it. I couldn't go back. Not there. But then the words changed. It's already inside you. The air turned cold again, and I felt a chill run through my body. I stumbled backward, looking over my shoulder, trying to catch my breath, but the darkness behind me seemed to press in, tightening, suffocating. I could hear it now, the footsteps. Soft, deliberate. Coming closer. A figure. The same one I had seen before. The same eyes glowing in the dark. Watching. Waiting. I tried to run, but it was no use. The darkness was already in me. It was inside me now, crawling beneath my skin, wrapping around my thoughts, pulling me deeper into the nightmare. I couldn't escape. There was no way out. The last thing I saw before everything went black was the figure standing in front of me, its eyes locked onto mine, its hollow smile stretching wider as the hum filled the air. And then nothing. Thank you for listening till the end. I hope you were able to relax and will now get a good rest. And don't worry, new stories are already on the way for tomorrow, so don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to stay connected. Now have a good night. See you in the next episode.